The cortisol spike, your body's silent morning saboteur. What if the very first chemical your body releases every morning is secretly wiring your blood sugar for disaster, and you've been sleeping right through it? Here's something that should genuinely disturb you. Before your eyes even fully open, before your feet touch the floor, your adrenal glands have already fired. They've released a powerful hormone called cortisol, and cortisol doesn't ask for your permission. It surges every single morning. It's called the cortisol awakening response, or CAR, and it peaks within 30 to 45 minutes of waking. Now here's where it gets fascinating and terrifying at the same time. Cortisol is a glucocorticoid. That word alone should stop you cold. Gluco, as in glucose, as in blood sugar. Cortisol's job is to flood your bloodstream with glucose to give you energy to face the day. Brilliant system in a world where you woke up needing to outrun a predator. But in your modern life, that glucose floods in, insulin scrambles to respond. And if your morning habits amplify this spike, you have set a metabolic tone for the next 16 hours that no salad at lunch will fully correct. The morning cortisol curve is the master dial of your entire day's blood sugar rhythm, and almost nobody is managing it consciously. The dawn phenomenon, nature's pre-programmed sugar surge. What if your blood sugar was already rising while you were still dreaming, and the breakfast you eat either extinguishes that fire or pours gasoline directly onto it? This is called the dawn phenomenon, and it is one of the most underappreciated pieces of human biology in existence. Between roughly 3 a.m. and 8 a.m., your body, completely without your input, begins releasing a cocktail of counter-regulatory hormones: cortisol, glucagon, growth hormone, and epinephrine. Their collective mission? Raise blood glucose to prepare you for waking activity. In a metabolically healthy person, insulin manages this beautifully. But here's the brutal reality of the modern world. Most people today are walking around with varying degrees of insulin resistance, meaning their insulin signal has been weakened by years of processed food, poor sleep, and chronic stress. In an insulin-resistant body, the dawn phenomenon doesn't just nudge blood sugar up, it launches it. And then people wake up, skip the information their body is screaming at them, grab a glass of orange juice or a bowl of instant oatmeal, pure liquid glucose, and wonder why they're exhausted, foggy, and craving sugar by 10 a.m. The dawn phenomenon is not a disease. It is a window, a 90-second window of opportunity that most people slam shut before they even realize it was open. Light, your eyes, and the glucose clock you never knew you had. What if staring at your phone the moment you wake up is not just ruining your focus, it is actively destroying your blood sugar regulation in ways that compound every single day? Here is a piece of biology so elegant and so alarming that once you understand it, you will never pick up your phone in bed again. Your body runs on a circadian clock, a 24-hour internal timing system governed primarily by light. Inside your eyes sit specialized photoreceptors called intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells, IPRGCs, and they communicate directly with your suprachiasmatic nucleus, the master clock of your brain. This clock doesn't just regulate sleep, it governs insulin sensitivity, glucose metabolism, and the timing of pancreatic beta cell function. Natural morning sunlight, specifically blue spectrum light, signals your circadian system to synchronize, which progressively improves insulin sensitivity throughout the day. But artificial blue light from your phone screen in a dark room? It sends a confused, contradictory signal. It tells your brain it's daytime while your cortisol and glucose systems are still in their peak morning surge, creating a metabolic mismatch that elevates blood sugar, blunts insulin response, and begins a cascade of hormonal dysregulation. 2 minutes of natural morning light within 90 seconds of waking can change your entire metabolic trajectory. Most people spend those 2 minutes reading notifications, the first meal timing trap. Why when you eat matters more than what you eat. What if everything you've been told about breakfast being the most important meal of the day is not just wrong, but has been biochemically backwards for your blood sugar this entire time? Let's get precise about this because precision matters here. The moment you consume any food that raises blood glucose, and that includes foods marketed as healthy, your pancreas releases insulin. Insulin is not the villain. But timing insulin release during peak cortisol is like throwing a match into a room already filling with gas. In the first 30 to 90 minutes after waking, cortisol is at its highest point of the day. Cortisol directly opposes insulin. It is anti-insulin by design. So when you eat a high glycemic breakfast during peak cortisol, your blood sugar spikes higher, your insulin has to work harder, and your cells, already being told by cortisol to resist glucose uptake, become temporarily more insulin resistant. The result is a sharper glucose spike followed by a steeper crash. The 10 a.m. energy collapse millions of people experience and incorrectly blame on not eating enough. Delaying your first meal by even 60 to 90 minutes after waking, allowing cortisol to begin its natural decline, can reduce post-meal glucose spikes by a measurable significant margin. The timing of your first meal is not a diet choice, it is a hormonal strategy. Movement in the morning, the free drug that rewrites your glucose destiny. What if the single most powerful blood sugar intervention available to humanity costs exactly $0, requires no prescription, produces no side effects, and takes less than 5 minutes, and almost everyone is skipping it? I want to talk about skeletal muscle because skeletal muscle is the most underrated organ in your body when it comes to glucose metabolism. Here is the fact that changes everything. Muscle tissue contains a protein called GLUT4, glucose transporter type 4. Under normal conditions, GLUT4 requires insulin to move glucose from your bloodstream into your muscle cells. But, and this is extraordinary, muscle contraction itself triggers GLUT4 activation independently of insulin, completely bypassing the insulin pathway. When you move your large muscle groups in the morning, squats, brisk walking, stair climbing, even standing and doing calf raises, you are opening glucose channels across your largest metabolic tissue without needing a single unit of insulin. You are physically draining excess blood glucose into your muscles like water into a sponge. A study published in Diabetologia found that 10 minutes of morning walking after waking could lower blood glucose by as much as 22% compared to remaining sedentary. 10 minutes, not an hour, not a gym session. 10 minutes of moving your body in the morning can fundamentally alter your glucose curve for the entire day, a curve that will touch every organ, every cell, every thought you have. Hydration, stress, and the hormonal domino effect nobody warns you about. What if the glass of water you keep ignoring every morning is not just a wellness cliche, but a biochemical necessity that when skipped triggers a hormonal cascade that keeps your blood sugar elevated for hours? Let me walk you through the exact mechanism because this is where biology gets almost poetically ruthless. During sleep, you lose between 0.5 and 1 liter of water through respiration and perspiration. You wake up in a state of mild dehydration every single morning without exception. Dehydration, even at this mild level, activates your body's stress response system. Your hypothalamus detects the fluid deficit and signals the release of vasopressin, also called antidiuretic hormone. Here's the connection most people miss entirely. Vasopressin stimulates the liver to produce more glucose through a process called hepatic gluconeogenesis. Your liver, responding to the dehydration stress signal, literally manufactures new glucose and dumps it into your bloodstream. At the same time, mild dehydration elevates cortisol. Remember cortisol from Keynote 1? Adding another layer to the morning glucose spike that was already building. And then because dehydration impairs cognitive function, you feel groggy, you reach for caffeine on an empty stomach. And caffeine, a powerful cortisol stimulator, amplifies the entire cascade further. One glass of water within 90 seconds of waking interrupts this entire chain reaction before it begins. The simplest possible intervention, the most consistently ignored. What if I told you that the 90 seconds immediately following the moment your alarm goes off, that brief, groggy, half-conscious window where most people reach for their phone or stumble toward the coffee machine, are the most metabolically consequential 90 seconds of your entire day? Not your workout, not your dinner, not whether you had dessert. Those 90 seconds. Now, I find that most people, when presented with a fact like that, do one of two things. They either dismiss it because it sounds too simple to be true, or they get genuinely curious. And I want to invite you today into that second category, because the biology here is not just important, it is astonishing in its elegance and its brutality. Let me start with something happening inside your body right now that you probably never think about. Your blood sugar, your blood glucose, is not a static number. It is a living, dynamic, constantly shifting curve that rises and falls in response to food, hormones, light, movement, stress, hydration, and a dozen other variables that most people never connect to the way they feel. And here is the critical insight. That curve has a master setting, and it is calibrated every morning in the first 90 seconds after you wake. Let's talk about cortisol first, because cortisol is where this story begins, and it is a story most people never get told. Before your eyes open, your adrenal glands have already fired. They have released cortisol, a glucocorticoid hormone, and notice that word glucocorticoid. It contains the word glucose for a reason. Cortisol's fundamental biological job is to raise blood sugar. It tells your liver to release stored glucose. It tells your cells to temporarily resist insulin. It floods your bloodstream with fuel, because evolutionarily, waking up meant facing a physical challenge. This is called the cortisol awakening response, and it peaks between 30 and 45 minutes after waking. This is not a malfunction. This is a design feature. But here is where modern life has turned a brilliant design feature into a slow metabolic disaster. Your morning habits, the ones you perform mindlessly, the ones you've never questioned, are either dramatically amplifying that cortisol spike or intelligently working with your biology to taper it gracefully. And the difference between those two outcomes is not a medication. It is not a supplement. It is behavior. Specific, targeted, biologically grounded morning behavior that takes less than 90 seconds to initiate. Now, let me add another layer, because this is where it gets genuinely remarkable. Your blood sugar was already rising while you were asleep. This is called the dawn phenomenon, a pre-programmed hormonal surge that begins around 3 a.m. and accelerates toward waking, driven by growth hormone, glucagon, epinephrine, and cortisol, all working in concert to prepare your body for consciousness. In a metabolically healthy person with sharp insulin sensitivity, this surge is managed seamlessly. But in a body where insulin signaling has been blunted, and in the modern world that describes a staggering percentage of the population, this pre-dawn surge pushes blood glucose to elevated levels before you've eaten a single thing. And then what do people do? They grab orange juice, instant oatmeal, a banana, a coffee with sugar, all liquid glucose delivered directly into a system already flooded with cortisol-driven blood sugar elevation. The post-breakfast spike that follows is not a mystery. It is a predictable, entirely avoidable consequence of not understanding the biology of your own morning. Now I want to tell you something about light, because this is the part that, when I first understood it fully, I had to sit down for a moment. Your body has a clock, not a metaphorical clock, a literal molecular biochemical timing system called the circadian clock, governed by light signals received through photoreceptors in your eyes that connect directly to your suprachiasmatic nucleus, the brain's master timekeeper. And this clock does not just regulate when you feel sleepy. It regulates insulin sensitivity. It regulates pancreatic function. It regulates glucose metabolism across every tissue in your body. Natural morning sunlight, real light, even through cloud cover, synchronizes this clock and progressively improves insulin sensitivity through the course of the day. Your phone screen does not do this. Your phone screen sends a confused artificial signal into a circadian system that is already at peak cortisol sensitivity and creates a metabolic mismatch that elevates blood sugar and impairs insulin response. 2 minutes of natural light within 90 seconds of waking is one of the highest leverage metabolic interventions available to you. Most people spend those 2 minutes reading emails. Let's talk about when you eat, because the timing question is where I see the most widespread misunderstanding. Breakfast, we have been told since childhood, is the most important meal of the day. That phrase was not born from science. It was born from a cereal advertisement in the early 20th century, and it has survived not because it is true, but because it is commercially convenient. Here is what the biology actually says. Consuming food that raises blood glucose during peak cortisol, the first 30 to 90 minutes after waking, forces your pancreas to release insulin at precisely the moment when cortisol is actively working against insulin. The result is a sharper spike, a steeper crash, and a glucose curve that undermines energy, cognition, and metabolic health for hours afterward. Delaying your first meal until cortisol begins its natural decline, even by 60 minutes, allows insulin to operate in a more favorable hormonal environment. Your glucose spike is blunted. Your insulin response is more efficient. Your energy curve is smoother. This is not a diet. This is hormonal timing. And hormonal timing is physics applied to biology. Now I want to give you something that costs nothing and requires almost no time, because one of the things that genuinely frustrates me about the wellness conversation is how often simple, elegant, scientifically grounded solutions get buried under expensive complexity. Your muscles are glucose sponges. Inside your skeletal muscle tissue, your largest metabolic organ, there is a protein called GLUT4, whose job is to transport glucose from your blood into your cells for fuel. Under normal conditions, GLUT4 needs insulin to activate. But when muscle contracts, when you move, GLUT4 activates completely independently of insulin. You don't need a higher insulin signal. You need muscle contraction. 10 minutes of movement in the morning, a brisk walk, body weight squats, stairs can lower your blood glucose by over 20% compared to remaining sedentary. Not through insulin. through the direct mechanical activation of glucose uptake in your largest tissue bed. This is the free drug. It has no side effects. It costs nothing. It takes 10 minutes. And the majority of people skip it entirely. And finally, the one that surprises people most, because it seems almost too mundane to matter, water. You wake up dehydrated. Every morning, without exception. You have lost up to a liter of fluid overnight through breathing and perspiration. And that mild dehydration activates a stress response that triggers vasopressin release, which stimulates your liver to produce more glucose through hepatic gluconeogenesis. Simultaneously, dehydration elevates cortisol, and dehydration-induced grogginess triggers the coffee reach. And caffeine is a potent cortisol stimulator that amplifies the entire morning glucose cascade further. 1 glass of water within 90 seconds of waking interrupts this entire chain before the cortisol amplifies, before the liver floods glucose, before the caffeine stacks on top of an already elevated stress response. 1 glass of water is the least glamorous, most consistently ignored, most biologically important first act of your morning. What is happening inside your body in the 90 seconds after you wake is not random. It is not beyond your control. It is a precise biological sequence, documented, understood, and manageable if you choose to engage with it consciously. The cortisol is rising. The dawn phenomenon, glucose, is already circulating. The circadian clock is waiting for its light signal. The muscles are ready to absorb glucose if you ask them to. The liver is watching hydration status. All of these systems are poised in that 90-second window to either tip toward balance or cascade toward dysregulation. And the extraordinary thing, the thing I find genuinely beautiful about this biology, is that the interventions are so simple, so free, so immediately available to every single person alive. Light, movement, water, timing. Not drugs, not devices, not expensive protocols. Light, movement, water, timing. 4 variables, 90 seconds, 1 decision. Your blood sugar curve for the entire day, the curve that influences your energy, your cognition, your mood, your hunger, your cardiovascular health, your long-term metabolic trajectory is set in that window. The question is simply whether you set it with intention or you let it set itself by default. Here is what I want you to take away from everything we've covered today, and I want to say it plainly, because clarity matters more than complexity. Your body is not broken. Your metabolism is not failing you randomly. It is responding with extraordinary precision to the inputs it receives, and the most powerful inputs of any given day arrive in the first 90 seconds after you open your eyes. You now understand the cortisol awakening response. You understand the dawn phenomenon. You understand how light synchronizes your glucose metabolism. You understand why timing your first meal matters more than what's in it. You understand that your muscles are insulin-independent glucose transporters waiting to be activated. You understand that a glass of water is a hormonal intervention. This is not complicated. It is just not commonly known. And now it is known to you. What you do with that knowledge, starting tomorrow morning, in those 90 seconds, is entirely and completely your choice. Biology has given you a window every morning, without fail. A 90-second window to set the tone for everything that follows. Open it wisely. What if the single most important health decision you make every day happens before you are even fully awake? In a 90-second window, most people waste completely without ever knowing it existed. Here is a fact that I find genuinely staggering. Your blood sugar for the entire day, not just the morning, the entire day, is being set right now, in the moments immediately after your alarm goes off, by a precise sequence of hormonal events that most people have never been told about, and almost no one is managing consciously. Cortisol is firing. Your liver is releasing glucose. Your circadian clock is waiting for a signal. Your muscles are ready to absorb fuel if you ask them to. And in 90 seconds, you either work with this biology or you accidentally work against it. And the consequences compound across every meal, every energy crash, every foggy afternoon, every restless night. I'm going to show you exactly what is happening inside your body in those 90 seconds and the 4 devastatingly simple things that change everything. Stay with me. Because once you understand this, you will never look at your morning the same way again.